As the war enters another winter, Ukraine has been scrambling to defend against Russia's bombing campaign.
At 4:13 a.m., a thin coat of frost covered the Kursk border as the first hint of light appeared above the tree line. It came from a single interceptor missile launched quickly, a sharp rising trail that caught a small Ukrainian drone in the early morning air. The Russians below witnessed a clean interception, nothing more than standard procedure. But the moment that drone vanished, the real operation actually started. Hours before, commercial satellites had recorded something unusual at a remote dock in Nakhodka. Sealed containers marked with foreign military codes, vehicle outlines hidden beneath insulated covers, and heat traces suggesting newly maintained artillery headed for the Kharkiv sector. Ukraine did not stop it right away. It waited, observed, and tracked every movement until the route was established. Because sometimes the most crucial strike begins not with fire, but with patience. And what came next would change the night. – 4:12 a.m. Over the frozen forest of Russia's Kursk border, the first alert came from space. High above the atmosphere, a commercial imaging satellite. One of Maxar's newer high-resolution systems captured something that should not have been there. In a dark corner of Nakhodka's eastern port, containers marked with Class 7 export codes from the Chinese defense industry were being unloaded under blackout conditions. No cranes, no night floodlights, no visible workers. Just personnel operating discreetly under low-light conditions. The cargo inside those containers mattered even more. Not the older systems already familiar to Western analysts, but advanced military vehicles. An upgraded version with improved recoil control and extended barrel life. According to the satellite's heat signatures, at least 9 vehicles had been powered up and driven onto transport trucks. The estimated value of the shipment approached $80 million. A figure high enough to alter the pace of an entire battlefield if it ever reached the front lines. Kyiv did not wait for a second confirmation. Within minutes, intelligence teams began a monitoring process known as Spectre Trail. A single Switchblade 300 reconnaissance drone was redirected from patrol and pushed toward Kursk, staying at an altitude above 6,800 meters, while sending encrypted data bursts every 29 seconds. Its mission was simply to verify the convoy's direction, but it never finished that mission. At 4:13 a.m., a Book M12 battery, hidden beneath frost-covered pines, launched a 9M317 interceptor, a thin streak of light that stabbed into the early morning sky. The impact was instant, a flash, then nothing. Russian troops celebrated, convinced they had removed a threat. But the final signal the drone transmitted, less than 1/10 of a second before disappearing, contained a line of coordinates. Not precise enough to target, but precise enough to predict the route the convoy would follow. And that was all Ukraine needed. 4:14 a.m. Along the snow-covered banks of the Oskil River, Ukraine moved from observation to action. Beneath a canopy of frost-laden branches, an upgraded M113 command vehicle sat completely motionless, wrapped in thermal-absorbent mesh that made its shape blend into the ground. Inside the dim compartment, green screens flickered as operators reviewed the final data fragments the fallen drone had sent. The coordinates were not perfect, but they were enough to outline a 19-kilometer corridor the convoy would likely pass through. For those watching this, ask yourself this: would you take the shot with incomplete information, knowing you might not get a second chance? The Ukrainian crew answered that question without hesitation. The lead operator armed 24 Gamma 5 FPV scouts, lighter than their frontline drones, but agile enough to maneuver between trees at nearly 120 kilometers per hour. One by one, the drones rose silently, climbing just above treetop level, before spreading into the dark, like sparks blown from a hidden forge. 2 minutes later, static crawled across the monitors. A Russian Orlan 10 reconnaissance drone swept into the area, its mid-range jamming equipment pushing interference into every channel. The images on the M113 screens distorted, then blurred, then broke into static. For a brief moment, it looked as if the entire operation would collapse before it even began. so the crew escalated. A single Gamma 5 dropped low and impacted a support vehicle in the main column. The disruption was not large, but it impaired an auxiliary fuel tank and forced the convoy to reorganize its spacing, slowing its movement by almost 30%. That slowdown would become critical, but Russia did not remain passive. Counter-drone units attempted to disrupt the operation, dropping 3 Ukrainian FPVs instantly and signaling they had begun a systematic sweep for the source of the intrusion. What they did not realize was that Ukraine had never intended these drones to strike hard. They were merely setting the stage. Because in the next moment, the real attack, the one designed to dismantle the entire convoy, was already rising into the sky. At 4:20 a.m., deep inside the narrowest bottleneck of the Belgorod forest, the real strike began. Inside the M113, the temperature felt colder than the air outside. Every operator knew the previous maneuvers. Those small intentional disruptions had slowed down the convoy enough for the main assault window to align with satellite overhead passes. The clock now matched that window to the second. On the central monitor, a soft pulse blinked. Authorization granted. 22 Tor-9 attack drones rose from the tree line in near-perfect silence. Each weighed just under 2.5 kilograms, but carried specialized drones equipped with advanced sensors designed to track heat gradients through dense foliage. Unlike conventional FPVs, they did not form up. They scattered immediately into erratic, spiraling paths. Movements calculated by the Spectre Swarm algorithm, a behavioral model built to dissolve into radar noise. To Russian sensors, they appeared as meaningless environmental flickers. To Ukraine, they were a synchronized weapon. The first complication arrived within seconds. A Russian K-52M gunship lifted from a forward helipad 20 kilometers away, closing the distance with a cruising speed above 270 kilometers per hour. Its Vickers missiles and multispectral optics posed a direct threat to the M113, the one asset Ukraine could not afford to lose. The forest trembled faintly as the helicopter approached. The operator reacted without hesitation. A countermeasure system was launched vertically, climbing to 4,500 meters before transitioning into glide mode. Its thermal seeker struggled at first. The Ka-52M's fuselage radiated multiple overlapping heat sources, but a brief dip in rotor wash revealed a clearer signature: the Switchblade Dove. It made contact with the helicopter's systems, forcing it to disengage, crippling the gunship's targeting equipment. For the first time since the operation began, the air above the convoy was unguarded. That opening was enough. The Tor-9s dropped altitude as one, moved toward the targeted area. Their data feeds displayed distinct heat outlines. The lead transport vehicle, the 4 PLZ-05 artillery vehicles, the fuel carriers, the communication truck, each glowing brighter as the drones locked onto them from above. The final command was executed in complete silence. Swarm drop. And the forest, until then, frozen in pre-dawn stillness, braced for impact. At 4:23 a.m., the Belgorod forest ignited from within. The first Tor-9 connected with the lead transport truck, its penetrator punching through a 600-gallon diesel tank before triggering a delayed thermal burst. The ignition rolled outward in a low, heavy, waveless disruption. The convoy's front section lost organization instantly. Drivers braked, swerved, and collided as visibility collapsed into a sheet of orange haze. 2 seconds later, the second drone struck. This time, the target was one of the PLZ-05 artillery vehicles riding mid-column. The shaped charge did not need to the main gun. Instead, it pierced the auxiliary shell compartment, igniting a chain of 155mm rounds stored for rapid reload. The disruption fractured the vehicle's side plating and hurled debris across a radius of more than 40 meters, shredding cables and fuel lines on the adjacent carriers. Then, the cascade began. One Tor-9 after another descended along the convoy's thermal signatures. A fuel transporter at the rear was hit next, and its impaired tank released a rising column of vapor that ignited in a slow-blooming fire cloud. The heat density spiked so sharply that satellite sensors registered the anomaly in near real time. Within moments, 3 additional PLZ-05 units were engulfed in overlapping combustion zones, each one fed by impaired fuel lines. Across the forest floor, the convoy's communications truck took a glancing strike, enough to disable its routing electronics and send a surge through its wiring system. The system collapsed, and with it, the sector's command and control relay. Russian crews attempted to re-establish contact, but the air was saturated with interference from burning circuitry and shorting transmitters. By 4:26 a.m., the column had ceased to function as a single unit. It was no longer a convoy. It was a chain of isolated machines, each one trapped inside its own field of flame, and the destruction still had room to grow. At 4:30 a.m., the firestorms had begun to settle, but the battlefield below remained unrecognizable. The Belgorod forest had become a corridor of fractured steel. The intensity of the overlapping disruptions produced heat signatures so bright that a passing satellite in polar orbit flagged them as industrial flare anomalies. The images revealed a burn scar stretching nearly 1 kilometer, with pockets of heavily deformed metal cooling in irregular depressions. At the upper edge of the destruction zone, the remains of a PLZ-05 artillery unit lay on its side, its chassis warped by internal pressure after the onboard propellant cylinders impaired. Just meters away, the second vehicle was nothing more than a severely damaged structure. Its operational systems failed, like tinfoil analysts later estimated that the localized overpressure had peaked above 60 kilopascals, enough to compromise hull integrity even without a direct strike. Further down the line, the convoy's communications vehicle had collapsed into a shallow crater after its relay circuits overloaded and sparked a secondary fire. When the electronics burned out, the entire sector's command and control link, already strained, fell into silence. For almost 68 hours, no coherent communication passed through the node, leaving units in the area with communication disruptions and limited coordination. The shock rippled far beyond the forest. At Kharkiv's outer perimeter, Russian artillery groups expected the arrival of fresh vehicles to stabilize their firing grid. Instead, reconnaissance teams reported a sudden and unexplained reduction in outbound firepower. Ukrainian forces advanced due to reduced activity in the area, advancing an additional 3 to 4 kilometers into contested ground before encountering organized resistance inside Moscow's analysis rooms. The images from Belgorod circulated quietly. They showed not only destroyed hardware, but the failure of a coordinated supply effort, one that had been intended to reset the balance along an entire front. And though the flames were fading, the strategic impact had only begun to unfold. When a single coordinated strike can stall an entire sector, delay counterattacks for days, and upend a partnership worth tens of millions, what does that say about the future of warfare? Do you believe operations like this will reshape the conflict? Share your thoughts below.